I am Isabella Rodriguez, 31 years old, and 6 months ago I experienced a moment that shattered every cruel prediction my mother had made about my future. Standing in a federal courthouse in downtown Phoenix, wearing the dress blues of a United States Marine Corps lieutenant colonel, I watched as Judge Patricia Morrison rose from her bench, looked directly at me, and rendered a military salute that silenced a courtroom full of people who had come to witness my sister Sophia's sentencing hearing. My mother, seated in the gallery behind me, finally understood that the daughter she had dismissed as worthless had become the woman whose testimony would determine whether her other daughter would spend the next decade in federal prison. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The morning that would change everything began like any other day at Camp Pendleton, where I served as a Marine Corps Judge Advocate General Officer, specializing in military justice and federal criminal law. My assistant knocked on my office door at precisely 0800 hours, carrying a manila envelope that bore the official seal of the United States District Court for the District of Arizona. Inside was a subpoena that would force me to confront the family I had spent the past 13 years avoiding through dedication to military service and legal excellence. Sophia Rodriguez, my younger sister by 3 years, was facing federal charges for embezzling nearly $2 million from the Veterans Assistance nonprofit organization where she had worked as financial director. The prosecution had requested my testimony as a character witness, not because they expected me to defend her actions, but because my military record and legal expertise would provide crucial context for understanding the family dynamics that had contributed to her criminal behavior. They needed someone who could explain to the court how our upbringing had affected both of our life choices, creating one daughter who had dedicated her career to serving others, and another who had betrayed the trust of the very veterans she was supposed to help. Reading that subpoena while sitting in my office overlooking the Pacific Ocean, surrounded by commendations for military service that had taken me from enlisted recruit to commissioned officer to federal prosecutor, I felt the familiar weight of family shame that no amount of professional achievement had ever completely erased. Sophia's arrest had made national news, precisely because of the irony that someone entrusted with helping disabled veterans had stolen funds intended for their housing, medical care, and educational assistance. The media coverage had been particularly harsh because several veterans had lost their homes when promised assistance disappeared into Sophia's personal account. The drive from Camp Pendleton to Phoenix provided 8 hours of reflection on the family dynamics that had shaped both Sophia's criminal choices and my own relentless pursuit of achievement that had consumed my adult life. Our childhood in East Phoenix had been defined by our mother Carmen's bitter disappointment with her own circumstances, and her determination to ensure that her daughters understood their limitations rather than their potential. Carmen Rodriguez had immigrated from Guadalajara with dreams of professional success that were systematically destroyed by language barriers, credential recognition issues, and employment discrimination that relegated her to service positions despite her accounting degree and previous management experience. Rather than encouraging her daughters to overcome the obstacles she had faced, Carmen had internalized her failures as evidence that success remained beyond our family's reach. Her parenting philosophy centered on protecting Sophia and me from the disappointment she believed was inevitable if we aimed too high, which translated into constant reminders about our limitations, criticism of any achievement that suggested we might excel beyond her expectations, and active discouragement of educational or professional aspirations that extended beyond what she considered realistic for daughters of an immigrant single mother. The pattern had established itself early in our childhood. When I brought home report cards with straight A grades, Carmen would examine them suspiciously and remind me that academic success in elementary school meant nothing in the real world where people like us faced discrimination and limited opportunity. When I expressed interest in joining the debate team or student government, she would explain that such activities were designed for children whose families had connections and resources that we lacked. When high school counselors suggested that my grades and test scores qualified me for competitive scholarships, Carmen insisted that college represented an expensive fantasy that would only result in debt and disappointment. Sophia had responded to this environment by accepting our mother's limitations as accurate assessments of our potential, choosing paths that required minimal risk and offered immediate gratification rather than long-term advancement. She had graduated from high school with average grades, enrolled in community college business courses that she never completed, and moved through a series of administrative positions that provided stable income without demanding exceptional performance or professional growth. Her employment at the Veterans Assistance Organization had represented the pinnacle of her career aspirations, offering decent salary, respected work environment, and opportunities to help people while maintaining the comfortable mediocrity that Carmen had encouraged as realistic expectations for our family. My response to the same environment had been dramatically different. Carmen's constant reminders that I would never amount to anything had ignited a determination to prove her wrong that became the driving force behind every decision I made throughout adolescence and young adulthood. Rather than accepting her limitations as truth, I had interpreted them as challenges that demanded defiance through achievement that could not be dismissed or minimized. Every academic award, leadership position, and scholarship opportunity became ammunition in an ongoing battle to demonstrate that her predictions about my future were fundamentally incorrect. The military had provided the perfect environment for channeling this defiant energy into productive achievement that served purposes beyond personal validation. Marine Corps boot camp at Paris Island had been challenging, but no drill instructor could be more demanding or critical than Carmen Rodriguez had been throughout my childhood. The physical demands, mental pressure, and constant evaluation that broke down many recruits felt familiar and manageable compared to the emotional warfare I had survived at home. More importantly, the Marine Corps offered clear standards for advancement based on performance, leadership, and dedication rather than family background, social connections, or economic advantage. Rising through enlisted ranks from private to sergeant had provided the foundation for understanding military culture, leadership principles, and the importance of discipline in achieving objectives that initially seemed impossible. The Marine Corps had paid for my undergraduate education in criminal justice at Arizona State University, where I maintained perfect grades while serving weekend drill obligations and summer training requirements that prevented the social distractions that derailed many college students. Law school at Georgetown University had been funded through a combination of military scholarships and part-time work as a paralegal at a firm specializing in veterans legal assistance. Commissioning as a second lieutenant in the Judge Advocate General Corps had marked the beginning of my career as a military attorney, specializing in federal criminal law, court-martial proceedings, and military justice administration. The work combined intellectual challenges with service to fellow Marines and other military personnel who faced legal difficulties that could destroy their careers and futures. Each successful defense of a wrongly accused Marine, each prosecution of serious criminal behavior that threatened unit cohesion, and each legal ruling that upheld justice while protecting military readiness reinforced my commitment to using legal expertise in service of principles larger than personal advancement. Promotion to lieutenant colonel at age 30 represented achievement that exceeded every expectation Carmen had established for her daughter's potential. Military officers at that rank commanded respect from subordinates and superiors alike, earned salaries that provided financial security and social mobility, and served in positions that influenced policy decisions affecting thousands of military personnel and their families. Yet despite professional recognition that should have provided complete validation of my worth, Carmen's voice continued to whisper doubts about whether my success was real or sustainable, whether people truly respected my achievements or merely tolerated them, and whether I had actually proven anything meaningful about my capabilities or simply delayed the inevitable failure she had always predicted. The subpoena forcing my return to Phoenix represented an unwelcome opportunity to confront both Sophia's criminal choices and the family dynamics that had influenced our divergent paths. As a federal prosecutor with expertise in white-collar crime, I understood the legal complexities surrounding embezzlement cases and the factors that judges considered when determining appropriate sentences for financial crime. Sophia's theft of veterans' assistance funds represented particularly serious criminal behavior because it had exploited vulnerable populations who depended on those resources for basic needs, including housing, medical care, and educational assistance. The evidence against Sophia was overwhelming and undisputed. Bank records showed systematic transfers from organizational accounts to personal accounts over a 3-year period, with increasingly sophisticated methods for concealing the theft as her confidence in avoiding detection had grown. Financial audits revealed that she had used stolen funds to finance a lifestyle that far exceeded her legitimate salary, purchasing luxury vehicles, designer clothing, expensive vacation, and a house in an upscale neighborhood that would have been impossible to afford on her nonprofit organization income. More damaging than the financial evidence was the human impact of Sophia's crimes on the veterans who had been denied assistance when funds they desperately needed had been diverted to support her personal spending. The prosecution had assembled testimony from disabled veterans who had lost housing when promised rental assistance disappeared, students whose educational benefits had been delayed or denied when scholarship funds were unavailable, and families who had struggled with medical expenses while Sophia used their assistance money to fund European vacations and luxury purchases. The federal prosecutor assigned to Sophia's case, Assistant United States Attorney Jennifer Wall, had contacted me not to provide character testimony supporting Sophia, but to offer expert perspective on the family and cultural factors that might have contributed to her criminal behavior while ensuring that the court understood the full scope of harm her actions had caused to vulnerable veterans and their families. Walsh had reviewed my military record and legal background, recognizing that my expertise in federal criminal law and personal knowledge of Sophia's upbringing could provide valuable context for sentencing decisions. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. During our preliminary meeting at the federal courthouse in Phoenix, Walsh had explained her prosecution strategy and the role she expected my testimony to play in ensuring appropriate consequences for Sophia's crime. The government's position was that Sophia's theft represented betrayal of trust that demanded significant prison time to reflect the seriousness of exploiting vulnerable veterans. But they also recognized that understanding her background might inform rehabilitation strategies that could prevent future criminal behavior. "Your sister's crimes are serious and the evidence is clear," Walsh had explained during our conference in her office overlooking downtown Phoenix. "But the judge will consider family history, cultural factors, and personal circumstances when determining whether a lengthy prison sentence serves justice better than alternative approaches that might include restitution, community service, and supervised rehabilitation." Walsh had continued by explaining that my military service and legal career provided important contrast to Sophia's choices, demonstrating that family background did not inevitably determine criminal behavior, and that individuals could overcome challenging circumstances through dedication, hard work, and commitment to serving others rather than exploiting them for personal gain. "Your testimony will help the court understand that your sister had opportunities to make different choices, that your family's circumstances did not justify criminal behavior, and that people from similar backgrounds can achieve success through legitimate means." Walsh had concluded, "The judge needs to understand that Sophia's crimes reflected personal choices rather than inevitable outcomes of poverty, discrimination, or family dysfunction." The night before Sophia's sentencing hearing, I had stayed in a downtown Phoenix hotel rather than returning to the family home where Carmen still lived in the same East Phoenix neighborhood where Sophia and I had grown up. The decision to maintain distance from my family during this visit reflected years of boundary setting that had been necessary to protect my own mental health and professional focus from Carmen's ongoing negativity about my achievements and lifestyle choices. Our last significant interaction had occurred 3 years earlier during a brief visit home for Christmas, when Carmen had spent the entire weekend critiquing my military career as evidence that I was avoiding real-life responsibilities like marriage, children, and stable civilian employment that would demonstrate actual maturity rather than what she characterized as extended adolescence in uniform. According to Carmen's perspective, military service represented escape from adult responsibilities rather than professional achievement, and my dedication to Marine Corps values indicated inability to function in civilian society where real success was measured by material accumulation and social conformity. That Christmas visit had ended with heated arguments about my life choices. Carmen's disappointment that neither of her daughters had provided grandchildren or married men who could elevate the family's social status, and her frustration that my military salary and federal employment benefits had not translated into the luxury lifestyle she believed should accompany professional success. The conversation had revealed that Carmen viewed my achievements as personal rejection of her values and criticism of her parenting, rather than evidence of my own capabilities and dedication to serving purposes larger than immediate gratification. Sophia had remained silent during those arguments, neither defending my choices nor supporting Carmen's criticism, maintaining the neutral position she had adopted throughout our adult relationship to avoid confronting either my success or our mother's negativity. Her silence had felt like betrayal at the time, though I now understood that Sophia had been managing her own struggles with Carmen's expectations while making choices that would ultimately lead to the federal courthouse, where we would finally confront the consequences of our family's dysfunction. The morning of Sophia's sentencing hearing arrived with typical Phoenix sunshine that seemed inappropriate for such a solemn occasion. Walking into the federal courthouse wearing my Marine Corps dress, blue uniform, I felt the weight of representing not only my own professional achievements but also the values that had guided my life choices since leaving home at 18 to begin military service. The uniform represented commitment to honor, courage, and integrity that stood in stark contrast to the criminal behavior that had brought Sophia before Judge Morrison's court. Carmen sat in the gallery behind the defendant's table, wearing a black dress that seemed chosen to emphasize her role as the grieving mother of a daughter whose criminal choices had brought shame to the family. Her expression combined disappointment, anger, and resignation in ways that reminded me of countless childhood moments when she had predicted that Sophia and I would ultimately disappoint her expectations. Seeing her in that courtroom, I realized that Sophia's criminal behavior had validated Carmen's lifelong belief that her daughters were destined for failure, providing the evidence she had always expected to support her negative predictions about our future. The hearing began with standard procedural matters as attorneys presented final arguments and documentary evidence supporting their sentencing recommendations. Sophia's defense attorney argued for leniency based on her lack of prior criminal history, family obligation, and expressed remorse for her actions, while federal prosecutors emphasized the seriousness of exploiting vulnerable veterans and the need for significant consequences to deter similar crimes in the future. When Judge Morrison called my name to provide testimony, I approached the witness stand knowing that this moment would force Carmen to confront the reality that her worthless daughter had become a federal prosecutor whose expertise was valued by the court, whose military service commanded respect from judicial authority, and whose life choices had prepared her to speak with credibility about justice, accountability, and the consequences of criminal behavior. The next few minutes would challenge everything Carmen had believed about her daughter's potential and force her to witness the daughter she had dismissed, proving her worth in the most public and undeniable way possible. The Rodriguez household in East Phoenix operated according to principles that transformed love into limitation and protection into psychological imprisonment. Carmen Rodriguez had constructed an elaborate system of beliefs designed to shield her daughters from the disappointment she believed was inevitable for children of their circumstances, creating an environment where achievement was treated as dangerous delusion and ambition was systematically discouraged as unrealistic fantasy that would only lead to greater suffering when reality ultimately intervened. The foundation of Carmen's parenting philosophy rested on her own professional destruction following immigration to the United States. She had arrived from Guadalajara with a degree in accounting from Universidad de Guadalajara, 5 years of management experience at a regional manufacturing company, and fluent English skills that she had developed through private tutoring and business correspondence with American clients. Her credentials and experience should have translated into professional opportunities that matched her expertise and ambition. But the systematic barriers facing immigrant professionals in the late 1980s had relegated her to service positions that utilized none of her analytical capabilities or leadership experience. The credential recognition process had been the first devastating blow to Carmen's professional aspirations. American employers and licensing boards had refused to acknowledge her Mexican accounting degree as equivalent to United States educational standards, despite course transcripts that demonstrated mastery of advanced financial analysis, business law, and management principles that exceeded many American undergraduate programs. The requirement for additional coursework to achieve credential recognition had been financially impossible for a single immigrant woman working multiple jobs to cover basic living expenses. creating an insurmountable barrier between Carmen's qualifications and professional opportunities that matched her expertise. Employment discrimination had provided the second layer of systematic exclusion from professional advancement. Even positions that did not require specific credential recognition had been denied to Carmen based on accent, immigration status concerns, and cultural bias that treated foreign-born applicants as inherently less capable than American candidates with similar or inferior qualifications. The interviews she had managed to secure often ended with polite rejections that cited vague concerns about cultural fit or communication skills, euphemisms for discrimination that was difficult to challenge legally but devastating professionally. The economic pressure of supporting two young daughters as a single mother had forced Carmen to accept service positions that provided immediate income rather than career advancement opportunities. Cleaning offices, preparing food in restaurant kitchens, and providing childcare for affluent families had generated enough revenue to cover rent, utilities, and basic necessities. But these jobs had offered no possibility for professional growth or salary advancement that could improve her family's circumstances beyond subsistence-level survival. Years of underemployment had gradually eroded Carmen's confidence in her own capabilities and transformed her optimism about American opportunities into bitter understanding that success remained reserved for people whose backgrounds provided advantages that immigrant families could not access regardless of their qualifications, work ethic, or determination. The psychological toll of professional failure had been compounded by financial stress that made every month a struggle to avoid eviction, utility disconnection, or other crises that threatened the stability she was desperately trying to provide for Sophia and me. By the time Sophia and I reached elementary school age, Carmen had internalized her professional disappointments as evidence that the American dream represented false advertising designed to exploit immigrant hopes while maintaining economic hierarchies that kept families like ours trapped in service positions regardless of our potential or effort. Her parenting approach reflected this disillusionment through constant reminders that we should not develop aspirations that exceeded realistic expectations for daughters of an immigrant single mother without family connections, financial resources, or social advantages that enabled success for other children. The daily implementation of Carmen's protective pessimism had begun during our earliest educational experience. When Sophia and I brought home artwork from kindergarten, Carmen would examine our drawings and comments critically, pointing out technical flaws rather than celebrating creative expression or effort. When teachers sent positive notes about our classroom behavior or academic progress, Carmen would warn us that elementary school success meant nothing in the real world where people like us faced systematic barriers that would ultimately limit our opportunities, regardless of temporary achievements in protected environments. Parent-teacher conferences had become opportunities for Carmen to manage what she perceived as unrealistic expectations from educators who did not understand our family's limitations. When my second-grade teacher suggested that my reading comprehension and mathematical abilities indicated potential for accelerated academic programs, Carmen had dismissed these recommendations as misguided optimism from a teacher who had never worked with immigrant children, whose apparent capabilities would eventually be constrained by cultural and economic barriers beyond classroom performance. The pattern had intensified throughout our elementary and middle school years as Sophia and I developed distinct personalities and academic interests that reflected our different responses to Carmen's psychological environment. Sophia had embraced Carmen's limitations as accurate assessments of our potential, developing a cautious approach to challenges that prioritized safety over achievement and immediate gratification over long-term planning. Her academic performance had been consistently average, neither excelling enough to attract attention, nor failing enough to cause concern, maintaining the comfortable mediocrity that Carmen encouraged as realistic expectations for our family. My response to the same environment had been fundamentally rebellious, though I had not recognized my defiance as conscious resistance until years later during military psychological evaluations that helped me understand the psychological dynamics of my childhood. Carmen's constant predictions about my inevitable failure had triggered a determination to prove her wrong that became the driving force behind defined every academic, athletic, and leadership achievement throughout my adolescence. Rather than accepting her limitations as protective wisdom, I had interpreted them as challenges that demanded demonstration of capabilities she refused to acknowledge. The academic excellence that resulted from this internal rebellion had created additional tension within our household as Carmen struggled to reconcile my achievements with her beliefs about our family's realistic potential. When I consistently earned the highest grades in my classes, Carmen would explain that academic success in public school meant nothing because teachers lowered standards for students from disadvantaged backgrounds to avoid accusations of discrimination. When I won regional mathematics competitions, she would insist that these contests were designed to make immigrant children feel successful temporarily while preparing them for greater disappointment when they encountered real academic challenges in college or professional environments. High school had marked the beginning of serious conflicts between Carmen's protective pessimism and my growing awareness that her limitations might not represent accurate assessments of my capabilities. My enrollment in advanced placement courses, despite Carmen's insistence that such programs were designed for students whose families could provide tutoring and support that we could not afford, had resulted in consistently high performance that contradicted her predictions about my inability to compete with more privileged students. The college preparation process had become a battleground where Carmen's determination to protect me from disappointment collided with my increasing confidence that her assessments were fundamentally incorrect. When school counselors suggested that my grades, test score, and extracurricular achievements qualified me for competitive scholarships at major universities, Carmen had responded with elaborate explanations about why such opportunities were not intended for students like me and why pursuing them would only result in rejection that would damage my self-esteem and future prospects. Carmen's resistance to college planning had been particularly intense because higher education represented the exact type of aspiration she believed was most dangerous for our family. Universities demanded financial investments that could devastate our limited resources if scholarships failed to materialize, academic performance that would expose my supposed limitations when compared to students from more privileged backgrounds, and professional aspirations that would inevitably collide with the same barriers that had destroyed her own career prospects. The scholarship application process had required me to work around Carmen's active opposition to what she characterized as wasteful fantasy that diverted energy from practical job preparation that could provide immediate income for our family. I had completed application essays in the school library after hours, requested transcripts and recommendation letters without Carmen's knowledge, and researched financial aid opportunities through counselor meetings that I scheduled during lunch periods to avoid Carmen's interference with what she viewed as harmful encouragement from educators who did not understand our circumstance. Sophia's high school experience had unfolded according to Carmen's preferred model of realistic expectations and practical preparation for adult responsibilities that did not require exceptional achievement or risk-taking beyond our family's comfort zone. Her grades had been sufficient for graduation without attracting attention from college recruiters or scholarship committees. Her extracurricular activities had been limited to social clubs that provided entertainment without demanding leadership development, and her post-graduation plans had focused on immediate employment or community college programs that offered practical skills training rather than academic advancement. The contrast between Sophia's compliance with Carmen's limitations and my persistent rejection of those boundaries had created family dynamics that treated my achievements as implicit criticism of their choices rather than evidence of different capabilities or aspirations. Every scholarship I received, every academic award I earned, and every leadership position I accepted had been interpreted by Carmen and Sophia as proof that I considered myself superior to my family, rather than celebration of individual potential that did not diminish their worth or reflect negatively on their different choices. Carmen's response to my military enlistment had perfectly illustrated the psychological framework that governed her understanding of achievement and family loyalty. When I announced my decision to join the Marine Corps immediately after high school graduation, using military service to finance college education while developing leadership skills and professional experience, Carmen had interpreted this choice as abandonment of family responsibilities and rejection of the limited but stable opportunities she had identified as appropriate for our circumstances. The military represented everything Carmen feared about my ambitions, an environment that demanded exceptional performance, exposed individuals to extreme challenges that could result in injury or death, and created expectations for advancement that would inevitably exceed what someone from our background could realistically achieve. Her warnings about military service had combined practical concerns about physical danger with deeper fears that my success in demanding environments would validate her suspicions that I had always considered our family inferior to my potential. Sophia's support for Carmen's opposition to my military plans had revealed the extent to which she had internalized our mother's limitations as family loyalty, rather than psychological constraint. During family discussions about my enlistment, Sophia had consistently argued that military service represented escape from responsibilities to support Carmen financially and emotionally as she aged, suggesting that my pursuit of personal advancement demonstrated selfishness that prioritized individual achievement over collective family welfare. The departure for Marine Corps boot camp at Parris Island had occurred without family support or recognition that military service represented legitimate professional opportunity rather than dangerous fantasy that would inevitably result in failure and disappointment. Carmen's final conversation before my departure had focused on her expectations that I would realize my mistake quickly and return home to pursue more realistic employment that did not require capabilities she remained convinced I did not possess. The psychological impact of leaving home with family disapproval rather than encouragement had been significant during the early weeks of military training, when drill instructors deliberately created stress designed to reveal character under pressure and eliminate recruits who lacked the mental toughness required for Marine Corps service. The foundation of Carmen's protective pessimism had developed its first significant crack, though she would continue to resist acknowledging that her assessments of my limitations might be fundamentally incorrect, for several more years until federal court proceedings would force her to confront the full extent of her misjudgment about both daughters' potential and character. The moment that revealed my authentic calling occurred during my senior year of high school, when Gunnery Sergeant Michael Torres arrived at Desert Ridge High School to conduct recruitment interviews for students interested in Marine Corps enlisted programs and officer candidate opportunities. Presence represented the culmination of 2 years of young Marines training that had consistently demonstrated my aptitude for military leadership, while providing exposure to career fields that combined service with professional advancement in ways that aligned with my deepest values and emergence of purpose. Gunnery Sergeant Torres possessed the type of professional competence and personal integrity that immediately commanded respect from students and faculty members who had worked with numerous military recruiters throughout their career. His approach to recruitment emphasized honest assessment of military life's challenges and rewards rather than overselling opportunities or minimizing the commitments required for successful military service. His reputation for developing long-term mentoring relationships with recruits had resulted in exceptional retention rates and advancement records for young Marines who had enlisted through his guidance. The individual interview session with Gunnery Sergeant Torres had been scheduled to discuss potential military occupational specialties that would utilize my academic strengths while providing training in fields that offered civilian career applications following military service. His preliminary review of my academic record, young Marines' performance evaluations, and leadership activity participation had indicated potential suitability for military intelligence, logistics management, or communications specialties that required analytical capabilities and attention to detail while providing opportunities for rapid advancement through demonstrated competence. However, the conversation had taken an unexpected direction when Gunnery Sergeant Torres had begun discussing the Marine Corps Judge Advocate General program, which provided full scholarship opportunities for law school education in exchange for commissioned officer service, specializing in military legal practice. His description of the JAG program had introduced possibilities I had never considered seriously despite my consistent excellence in government and history courses that emphasized legal analysis and constitutional interpretation. The JAG program represented a pathway that could address Carmen's concerns about financial barriers to advanced education, while providing professional opportunities that exceeded any career trajectory she had ever imagined possible for our family. Military scholarship programs would eliminate the debt burden that made law school financially impossible for first-generation college students, while JAG officer responsibilities would provide immediate entry into legal practice with compensation and benefits that could support family obligations, while developing expertise in federal law and military justice system. Gunnery Sergeant Torres had explained that JAG officers served as prosecutors, defense counsel, and legal advisors for military personnel facing courts-martial, administrative actions, and personal legal challenges that could affect their military careers and family circumstances. The work required mastery of both military regulations and civilian legal principles while demanding the type of analytical precision and ethical integrity that military legal practice required to maintain justice and discipline within the armed forces structure. The intellectual challenges military legal practice had appealed to capabilities I had developed through advanced academic coursework while providing opportunities to serve fellow military personnel during the most difficult periods of their careers when legal problems threatened their professional advanced family stability and personal freedom. JAG officers possessed authority to influence outcomes in cases that could determine whether service members received appropriate consequences for misconduct or unfair punishment for actions that did not warrant severe disciplinary measure. More significantly, the JAG program would provide training in federal criminal law, constitutional interpretation, and judicial procedures that could translate into civilian legal careers after military service, while developing expertise in areas that few civilian attorneys possess. Former JAG officers frequently transitioned to federal prosecutor positions, judicial appointments, specialized legal practice that utilized their unique combination of military leadership experience and advanced legal training in ways that enhanced their professional competence and community contribution. The conversation with Gunnery Sergeant Torres had also revealed that military legal practice offered opportunities to address systemic issues affecting service members and their families through policy development, training program creation, and legal reform initiatives that could improve military justice and personnel management systems. JAG officers participated in developing regulations and procedures that affected thousands of military personnel, while ensuring that legal standards maintained fairness and effectiveness in supporting military readiness and individual rights. His description of JAG officer responsibilities had crystallized my understanding that military legal practice could provide the perfect integration of service commitment, intellectual challenge, and professional advancement that honored both my family's values and my personal aspirations for meaningful career achievement. The work would require exceptional competence and ethical integrity, while providing opportunities to contribute to justice and organizational improvement in ways that benefited individuals and institutions. The application process for the JAG program had been more demanding than any academic challenge I had previously encountered, requiring multiple essays analyzing complex legal scenario interviews with active duty JAG officers, who evaluated candidates' analytical abilities and communication skills, and extensive background investigations that examined character and suitability for positions involving classified information and significant responsibility for other people's legal welfare. The essay component had been particularly significant because it required demonstration of legal reasoning capabilities and ethical analysis skills that would be essential for successful law school performance and subsequent JAG officer duty. The prompts had focused on constitutional interpretation, military justice scenarios, and legal dilemmas that required balancing competing interests while maintaining integrity and fairness in challenging circumstances where simple solutions did not exist. One essay had required analysis of a hypothetical court-martial case involving a senior non-commissioned officer accused of sexual harassment, examining the legal standards for evidence evaluation, command influence concern, and victim protection considerations that could affect case outcomes while maintaining due process protections for the accused service member. The scenario had demanded understanding of military culture, legal procedure, and ethical obligations that JAG officers must navigate when prosecuting or defending cases that could destroy careers and reputations based on often conflicting testimony and circumstantial evidence. My response had drawn upon constitutional law knowledge, developed through advanced placement, government coursework while applying military justice principles I had learned through young Marines training, and independent research about courts-martial procedures and military legal standards. The analysis had required integration of legal theory with practical considerations about command climate, unit cohesion, and individual rights that military legal practice must address to maintain both justice and organizational effectiveness. The interview process had provided opportunities to discuss my motivations for pursuing military legal careers, while demonstrating communication skills and analytical capabilities that would be essential for effective JAG officer performance. Senior JAG officers had conducted multiple interviews focusing on different aspects of military legal practice, including prosecution responsibilities, defense advocacy, legal assistance provision, and administrative law functions that constitute the broad scope of military attorney duty. Colonel Sarah Martinez, the senior JAG officer who had conducted my final interview, had possessed extensive experience in military legal practice that included prosecution of serious criminal cases, defense of service members facing career-ending accusation, and legal policy development that had influenced military justice reforms throughout the service. Her assessment had been crucial for determining my suitability for JAG officer training and subsequent legal practice that would require exceptional competence under pressure while maintaining ethical standards in challenging circumstances. Colonel Martinez had begun the interview by examining my understanding of military culture and the unique considerations that affected legal practice within military organizations, where chain of command, unit cohesion, and mission readiness created complexities that civilian legal practice rarely encounter. Her questions had revealed the sophisticated understanding required for effective military legal practice that went beyond technical legal knowledge to encompass leadership principles and organizational dynamics that influenced case outcomes and command decisions. Her most challenging question had involved a scenario where I would serve as defense counsel for a Marine accused of desertion during combat operation, requiring me to analyze the competing obligations between zealous advocacy for my client and consideration of unit morale and military discipline that could be affected by aggressive defense tactics that undermined command authority or military justice credibility. My response had emphasized that effective defense advocacy required thorough investigation of all circumstances surrounding the alleged offense, while maintaining respect for military institutions and fellow service members who had fulfilled their duties under similar conditions. The analysis had acknowledged that defending service members accused of serious misconduct required balancing individual rights with institutional integrity in ways that preserved both justice and military effectiveness. Colonel Martinez had concluded the interview by discussing the personal challenges and professional rewards of JAG officer service, emphasizing that military legal practice provided opportunities to influence individual lives and institutional improvements while serving in positions that require absolute integrity and exceptional competence in high-stakes situations where mistakes could have devastating consequences for all parties involved. Her description of JAG officer responsibilities had confirmed my growing conviction that military legal practice represented the perfect integration of intellectual challenge, service commitment, and professional advancement that could provide meaningful career achievement while honoring family values and personal principles. The work would require continuous learning and ethical leadership, while providing opportunities to contribute to justice and organizational improvement in measurable ways. The JAG program acceptance notification had arrived during spring break of my senior year, providing official confirmation that I had been selected for the most competitive military scholarship program available to high school graduates, while validating my conviction that Carmen's assessments of my limitations had been fundamentally incorrect. The scholarship would provide full tuition, fees, and living expenses for 4 years of undergraduate education, followed by 3 years of law school, creating opportunities for advanced education that would have been financially impossible through civilian programs. More significantly, the program acceptance had represented external validation from military professionals who had evaluated hundreds of candidates annually for over 2 decades, while maintaining selection standards that ensured only the most capable and motivated individuals received opportunities for military training and officer commissioning. Their assessment had been based on demonstrated academic achievement leadership potential, and character evaluation that could not be influenced by sympathy or lowered expectation. Carmen's reaction to the JAG program acceptance had revealed the psychological complexity of her resistance to my achievements and the extent to which my success challenged her fundamental beliefs about our family's limitations and realistic potential. Rather than celebrating the scholarship opportunity that would provide advanced education without financial burden while leading to professional careers that exceeded any possibilities she had ever imagined for our family, Carmen had expressed concern that military legal practice would expose me to dangers and responsibilities that could result in professional failure and personal destruction. Her response had reflected deeper fears that my success in competitive programs validated her suspicions that I had always considered our family's circumstances inferior to my potential, rather than shared challenges that required collective practical response. According to her interpretation, my pursuit of military legal careers represented rejection of family values and abandonment of obligations to support her and Sophia through conventional employment that would provide immediate financial assistance, rather than pursuing advanced education that delayed practical family contribution. Sophia's reaction to my JAG program acceptance had been characteristically neutral, avoiding both enthusiasm that might offend Carmen and criticism that might strain our relationship. Her response had reflected the careful balance she had maintained throughout our adolescence between supporting family loyalty and acknowledging my individual achievement. Though her silence during Carmen's criticisms had felt like implicit agreement with concerns about my motivations and character, the final months of high school had been marked by increasing tension within our household as my preparation for military service created visible evidence that I was pursuing life paths that differed fundamentally from the conventional domestic success that Carmen had established as appropriate aspirations for our family. My participation in additional young Marines training, physical fitness preparation for military service, and research about law school curricula had demonstrated commitment to goals that extended far beyond the limited scope of achievement that Carmen considered realistic for our circumstance. The graduation ceremony at Desert Ridge High School had provided public recognition of my academic achievements and military scholarship award, while highlighting the contrast between my planned military service and Sophia's immediate entry into full-time civilian employment that would enable her to contribute to family financial support while pursuing the type of conventional stability that Carmen valued as evidence of mature responsibility and practical wisdom. The scholarship recognition during graduation had been particularly significant because it occurred in front of extended family members and community representatives who had observed my development throughout high school while witnessing Carmen's consistent discouragement of my academic and leadership pursuits. The public acknowledgement had made it impossible for Carmen to dismiss my achievements as temporary recognition that would ultimately prove meaningless when I encountered real challenges beyond protected academic environments. Ms. Chin's presentation of the JAG Scholarship Award had included detailed explanation of the selection criteria and competition level that had resulted in my acceptance, emphasizing that military legal programs represented some of the most competitive educational opportunities available to high school graduates, regardless of their family circumstances or economic background. Her description had positioned my selection as validation of exceptional potential rather than sympathy for disadvantaged students. The most powerful moment of the graduation ceremony had occurred when Ms. Chin had announced that my JAG program acceptance represented the first time in Desert Ridge High School history that a student had received military legal scholarship opportunity, creating a precedent that could inspire future students from similar backgrounds to pursue advanced education and professional careers that might otherwise seem beyond their reach. Her acknowledgement had transformed my individual achievement into a community milestone that demonstrated how exceptional dedication and supportive mentorship could overcome systematic barriers facing first-generation students from immigrant families. The recognition had validated both my personal efforts and Mrs. Chen's advocacy, while providing evidence that institutional support could enable students to achieve outcomes that exceeded traditional expectations for their demographic circumstance. The weeks following graduation had been consumed with final preparations for departure to the University of Arizona, where I would begin undergraduate studies, leading to law school admission and subsequent JAG officer commissioning. The transition had required extensive planning for academic success, while maintaining physical fitness standards and leadership development activities that would prepare me for the demands of military legal practice that would begin immediately following law school graduation. Carmen's final conversation before my departure for college had crystallized the fundamental differences between her protective pessimism and my emerging confidence that challenging opportunities provided pathways to meaningful achievement rather than inevitable disappointment. Her warnings about military service had combined legitimate maternal concern with deeper fears that my success would validate her suspicions about my character and motivations, while potentially exposing family limitations if I failed to meet the exceptional standards required for continued advancement. My response had emphasized gratitude for her sacrifices, while maintaining commitment to pursuing opportunities that honored both family values and personal potential for service and achievement. The conversation had ended without resolution of our fundamental disagreements about realistic expectations and appropriate aspirations. Though both of us had understood that my departure represented the beginning of divergent paths that would ultimately determine whether her protective pessimism or my optimistic determination proved more accurate in assessing my authentic capabilities and potential for meaningful contribution. The summer before beginning my undergraduate studies at the University of Arizona became a psychological battleground where competing loyalties and conflicting definitions of success waged war within my consciousness. The JAG program acceptance had provided external validation that my capabilities exceeded Carmen's predictions, yet 18 years of internalized messages about family obligations and realistic expectations continued to whisper doubts about whether pursuing military legal careers represent authentic calling or selfish abandonment of responsibilities to support my mother and sister through conventional employment that could provide immediate financial assistance. The internal conflict intensified during quiet moments when the excitement of academic opportunities and professional possibilities gave way to deeper questions about identity, loyalty, and the psychological cost of success that required separation from family dynamics that had shaped my understanding of worthiness and belonging throughout my formative years. Carmen's voice echoed in my mind during sleepless nights, raising questions about whether my achievements reflected genuine capability or temporary luck that would ultimately collapse when I encountered challenges that exposed limitations she had always known existed beneath surface-level academic success. The complexity of these psychological dynamics became particularly acute when I observed Sophia's consistent employment success and growing financial contributions to household expenses that enabled Carmen to reduce her work hours while maintaining the stability that had always been her primary objective for our family's circumstance. Sophia's conventional achievements provided practical benefits that my academic pursuits had never offered, creating tangible evidence that Carmen's preferences for realistic expectations and immediate practical outcomes might represent superior wisdom compared to my pursuit of uncertain professional opportunities that demanded years of preparation before generating meaningful return. Sophia's relationship with David Morales had also progressed toward engagement during this period, providing Carmen with the conventional family milestone that validated her beliefs about appropriate aspirations and mature life choices for daughters from our background. Their plans for marriage, homeownership, and children represented the type of traditional success markers that immigrant families typically celebrated as evidence of successful American integration and intergenerational advancement that honored sacrificial investments made by previous generations. The contrast between Sophia's conventional success trajectory and my military service preparation created increasingly obvious evidence that we had chosen fundamentally different approaches to adult responsibilities and family obligations. Sophia's path offered immediate gratification for Carmen's desire to see her daughters achieve stability and respectability within established social framework, while my military legal career represented extended uncertainty with no guarantee that advanced education and officer training would ultimately produce the type of conventional success that could provide comparable family validation. These psychological tensions were compounded by practical considerations about military service that Carmen had raised repeatedly throughout the summer months leading to my departure for college, her concerns about physical danger, geographic separation, and the possibility that military legal practice might expose me to criminal cases and moral complexities that could compromise my character, reflected legitimate maternal anxiety, combined with deeper fears about losing control over my development and decision-making processes that had previously been subject to her influence and guidance. Carmen's most persistent concern focused on her belief that military environments would fundamentally alter my personality and values in ways that would distance me from family relationships and cultural identity that had always grounded my sense of belonging and purpose. According to her analysis, military service demanded conformity to institutional values that conflicted with family loyalty and cultural traditions that should take precedence over individual professional advancement that served institutional objectives rather than family welfare and community preservation. Her warnings about military service also reflected broader fears about assimilation pressures that could erode cultural identity and family connections that had sustained our family through economic hardship and social challenges throughout her American experience. Carmen had witnessed other immigrant families experience intergenerational conflict when children achieved educational and professional success that created social mobility beyond their parents' circumstance, often resulting in cultural disconnection and family estrangement that left elderly parents isolated from children whose advancement had separated them from shared cultural frameworks and mutual obligations. The weight of these concerns created genuine psychological distress as I struggled to reconcile my excitement about military legal opportunities with growing awareness that pursuing authentic calling might require accepting permanent changes and family relationships that could cause lasting pain for people whose sacrifices had made my opportunities possible. The possibility that my success might ultimately validate Carmen's fears about character changes and family abandonment added emotional complexity to decisions that should have felt like clear progression toward meaningful professional achievement. The internal conflict reached crisis proportions during a family gathering in late July when extended relatives assembled to celebrate Sophia's engagement to David and discuss their wedding plans scheduled for the following spring. The celebration provided opportunities for family members to offer advice about marriage, career development, and adult responsibilities, while expressing expectations about my own timeline for achieving similar conventional milestones that would demonstrate mature development and family commitment. My Aunt Rosa, Carmen's older sister who had achieved middle-class stability through her husband's promotion to management positions within municipal government employment, expressed particular concern about my military plans during private conversations that revealed family expectations about appropriate career trajectories for young women from our cultural background. Her perspective emphasized the importance of maintaining geographic proximity to family while pursuing stable employment that could provide consistent financial support for aging parents who would eventually require assistance with medical expenses and daily living activity. Aunt Rosa's concerns reflected broader cultural values about intergenerational obligation and collective family welfare that prioritized group stability over individual advancement that might compromise family cohesion and mutual support system. Her advice emphasized practical considerations about marriage timing, career stability, and geographic accessibility that would enable me to fulfill traditional daughter responsibilities while achieving personal satisfaction through conventional domestic success that honored cultural expectations and family investments. The conversation with Aunt Rosa also revealed that extended family members had interpreted my military plans as evidence of reluctance to accept adult responsibilities associated with marriage and childbearing that represented natural progression toward mature life satisfaction and family contribution. According to their analysis, my academic achievements and military scholarship opportunities represented impressive individual accomplishments that should facilitate advantageous marriage prospects rather than substitute for conventional domestic fulfillment that provided lasting satisfaction and family validation. Family expectations created additional psychological pressure as I recognized that pursuing military legal careers might require disappointing multiple family members who had invested emotional energy in expecting conventional success trajectories that would enable them to celebrate my achievement. Within familiar frameworks for evaluating accomplishment and family contribution, the possibility that my choices might isolate me from cultural community and family validation added emotional stakes to professional decisions that already carried significant personal and financial risk. The internal struggle was further complicated by genuine uncertainty about my capacity to succeed in military environments that demanded sustained excellence under pressure while maintaining ethical integrity in situations that could compromise personal values or professional relations. Despite academic success and young Marines' training achievements, I lacked direct experience with the type of sustained stress and moral complexity that military legal practice would require, creating legitimate questions about whether my capabilities matched my ambitions in areas that could not be assessed through classroom performance or training exercise. These concerns about academic preparedness were intensified by imposter syndrome that questioned whether my selection for the JAG program reflected genuine capability or diversity considerations that might have lowered standards to include students from underrepresented backgrounds who lacked the authentic qualifications necessary for sustained success in competitive legal education and subsequent professional practice. The possibility that I might fail due to inadequate preparation or inferior capabilities created fears about public embarrassment that would validate Carmen's predictions while potentially compromising future opportunities for other students from similar circumstances. The summer's psychological turmoil reached resolution during a conversation with Captain Maria Santos, who had continued providing mentorship throughout my young Marines' participation and JAG program application process. Her perspective on military service and family obligations offered frameworks for understanding how individual achievement could honor rather than abandon family values, while creating opportunities for expanded contribution to community welfare and intergenerational advancement that exceeded conventional domestic success trajectory. Captain Santos had experienced similar internal conflicts during her own transition from family expectations toward military legal careers, providing experiential knowledge about psychological challenges associated with pursuing authentic calling that required temporary separation from familiar support systems, while developing capabilities that could ultimately provide greater family assistance than conventional employment paths would have enabled. Her analysis emphasized that military legal practice provided opportunities to develop expertise and professional networks that could benefit entire extended families through access to legal assistance, educational opportunity, and career guidance that would otherwise be unavailable to immigrant families who lacked connections within professional community. The long-term family benefits of military legal careers could exceed immediate financial contributions that conventional employment might provide, while creating precedents that would inspire younger family members to pursue advanced education and professional development. Captain Santos addressed concerns about cultural identity and family relationships by explaining how military service had actually strengthened her appreciation for family values and cultural traditions, while providing broader perspectives on how different communities addressed similar challenges related to economic advancement, intergenerational obligation, and cultural preservation within American society. Military experience had enhanced rather than diminished her capacity to contribute meaningfully to family welfare and community development through professional capabilities and expanded understanding of institutional systems that affected immigrant families. Her guidance helped reframe military service as extension rather than abandonment of family value, positioning advanced education and professional development as investments in capabilities that would ultimately provide superior family support, while honoring sacrificial contributions that previous generations had made to create opportunities for intergenerational advancement. The conversation provided psychological permission to pursue authentic calling while maintaining cultural identity and family commitment through different but potentially more effective mechanisms than conventional career paths offered. The resolution of internal conflict required accepting authentic calling, sometimes demanded temporary separation from familiar support systems, while developing capabilities that could ultimately provide expanded opportunities for meaningful contribution to family welfare and community development. The psychological challenge involved trusting that individual achievement could serve collective family interests, while honoring rather than rejecting values and relationships that had shaped my development throughout childhood and adolescence. The final weeks before departure for college were characterized by growing confidence that military legal careers represented appropriate integration of personal capabilities with family values and cultural identity, rather than selfish pursuit of individual recognition that would ultimately compromise relationships and community connections, provided meaning and belonging. The internal struggle had produced clarity about motivations and objectives that would guide decision-making throughout undergraduate studies and subsequent military service, while maintaining connection to family relationships and cultural foundations that would continue providing emotional support and moral guidance. Carmen's gradual acceptance of my military plans during these final weeks reflected her recognition that my determination had reached levels that made further opposition counterproductive, while potentially damaging our relationship beyond repair during what might be our last extended period of daily interaction before military service created geographic separation and communication. Her shift toward practical support for departure preparations represented implicit acknowledgement that my capabilities might exceed her original assessments, while maintaining hope that military service would ultimately validate, rather than compromise, family values and character development. The departure for the University of Arizona occurred with family relationships strained but intact, providing foundations for continued connection while enabling pursuit of authentic calling that would either validate or challenge Carmen's predictions about my character and potential for meaningful achievement. The internal struggle had been resolved through commitment to honoring family values, while developing capabilities that could ultimately provide expanded opportunities for family contribution and community service that exceeded conventional career trajectories, while maintaining cultural identity and relationship foundations that would continue providing guidance and support throughout military service and professional development. The final month before my departure for the University of Arizona transformed our household into a pressure cooker of escalating tensions, as Carmen enlisted every available family member, community connection, and cultural authority figure in a coordinated campaign designed to convince me that military service represented a catastrophic mistake that would destroy my future prospects, while abandoning family obligations that should take precedence over individual ambition. The intensity of her opposition reached levels that surprised even Sophia, who had previously supported Carmen's protective pessimism, but began expressing private concerns about the emotional manipulation tactics being employed to undermine my confidence and commitment to military legal career preparation. Carmen's strategy involved systematically contacting extended family members, family friends, and community leaders who possessed influence or credibility that might persuade me to reconsider military service in favor of conventional career paths that would enable immediate employment and geographic proximity to family responsibility. Her campaign required revealing personal family information and acknowledging my academic achievements to external parties, whom she had previously excluded from discussions about our circumstances, representing a significant departure from her typical preference for privacy about family matters that might expose our economic limitations or cultural challenges. The first major escalation occurred when Carmen contacted my uncle Miguel, her brother-in-law who had achieved significant financial success through construction company ownership that employed dozens of workers throughout the Phoenix metropolitan area. Uncle Miguel possessed the type of practical business experience and economic achievement that commanded respect within our extended family while providing credible perspective on career development and financial planning that could influence my decision-making process through authoritative guidance rather than emotional appeals that had proven ineffective in previous discussions. Uncle Miguel's intervention took the form of an elaborate dinner invitation that was presented as family celebration, but revealed itself as carefully orchestrated intervention designed to present alternative career opportunities while emphasizing practical concerns about military service that Carmen hoped would resonate with my analytical thinking and goal-oriented personality. The dinner included detailed presentations about construction industry opportunity apprenticeship programs that could provide immediate income while developing valuable trade skills and long-term career advancement possibilities that could enable business ownership and substantial financial success without requiring college education or military service commitments. Presentation emphasized practical advantages of immediate employment that would enable me to contribute to family financial support while developing marketable skills that could provide economic security regardless of broader economic conditions or industry-specific changes that might affect white-collar employment opportunities. According to Uncle Miguel's analysis, construction industry careers offered superior long-term financial prospects compared to military legal practice because business ownership possibilities enabled unlimited income potential while military service restricted advancement through predetermined rank structures and salary limitations that could never provide comparable wealth accumulation opportunities. The most compelling aspect of Uncle Miguel's alternative proposal involved his offer to provide immediate employment within his construction company, financing apprenticeship training that would prepare me for supervisory and eventually management responsibilities, leading toward partnership opportunities within his established business enterprise. His offer represented genuine career opportunity that would eliminate financial barriers to professional advancement while providing family employment that could strengthen rather than strain family relationships through shared business interests and collective economic development. Uncle Miguel's intervention also included detailed analysis of military service risks that extended beyond physical danger concerns to encompass career limitations and institutional constraints that could restrict my professional development and personal freedom throughout my adult life. Perspective emphasized that military service required subordination of individual preferences to institutional objectives that might conflict with family obligations or personal values, while limiting geographic mobility and career flexibility that civilian employment typically provided market-based advancement opportunities. The sophistication of Uncle Miguel's arguments required serious consideration because they addressed legitimate concerns about military service while offering concrete alternatives that could provide meaningful career advancement without requiring separation from family support systems or exposure to institutional risks that could compromise my personal development or professional prospects. His business success provided credible evidence that alternative career paths could achieve financial security and social recognition without requiring college education or military service commitments that involved substantial uncertainty about ultimate outcomes. However, the underlying assumptions of Uncle Miguel's proposal revealed fundamental misunderstanding of my motivations and professional aspirations that extended beyond financial security toward meaningful contribution to justice and legal advocacy that could not be achieved through business success regardless of its financial reward. His framework treated career decisions as primarily economic calculations that should optimize financial returns while minimizing risks an approach that ignored the service orientation and intellectual challenge requirements that had drawn me toward military legal practice in the first place. The second major intervention involved Carmen's coordination with Father Rodriguez, the priest at our parish church, who possessed significant moral authority within our community, while maintaining traditional perspectives on family obligations and appropriate life choices for young women from cultural backgrounds that emphasized collective welfare over individual advance. Father Rodriguez's involvement represented Carmen's attempt to frame my military plans as potential conflict with religious values and cultural traditions that should guide decision-making processes for faithful Catholics who prioritized spiritual development and family service over secular achievement. Father Rodriguez's approach emphasized theological perspectives on military service that questioned whether combat-related activities and institutional loyalty requirements might compromise moral development or create situations where religious principles could conflict with military duties in ways that could damage spiritual well-being or eternal salvation prospects. His concerns reflected traditional Catholic teaching about warfare and violence, while acknowledging legitimate applications of military service for defensive purposes and peacekeeping activities that served just causes and protected innocent populations. The priest's analysis also focused on family obligation teachings that emphasized daughters' responsibilities to provide care and support for aging parents, while maintaining geographic proximity that would enable practical assistance during health crises or economic difficulties that typically affected elderly immigrant families, lacked extensive social safety net resources, or professional support systems. According to Catholic social teaching, individual achievement should serve family welfare and community development, rather than pursuing personal advancement that could compromise collective well-being or intergenerational support obligations. Father Rodriguez's most significant concern involved his belief that military legal practice would expose me to moral complexities and ethical dilemmas that could compromise spiritual development, while requiring participation in institutional decisions that might conflict with Catholic teachings about human dignity, social justice, and peaceful conflict resolution. His perspective emphasized that young Catholics should choose career paths that supported, rather than challenged, religious values, while providing opportunities for faith-based service that honored God's calling rather than pursuing secular advancement, prioritized institutional loyalty over spiritual development. The theological framework of Father Rodriguez's opposition created particularly challenging psychological pressure because it questioned not only the practical wisdom of my career decisions, but also their compatibility with spiritual values and moral principles that had provided guidance throughout my development and decision-making processes. The possibility that military service might compromise my relationship with God or Catholic faith community added spiritual dimensions to career choices that had previously been evaluated primarily through practical and professional consideration. The third major intervention occurred when Carmen contacted Mrs. Elena Vasquez, a respected community leader who had achieved recognition through educational advocacy and immigrant rights organization that had successfully influenced local policy decisions while maintaining strong connections to traditional cultural values and family-centered community development approaches. Mrs. Vasquez possessed credibility within both American institutional frameworks and traditional cultural communities, providing balanced perspective that could bridge differences between individual achievement and collective community welfare. Mrs. Vasquez's approach involved detailed discussion of alternative pathways for achieving professional advancement, while maintaining cultural identity and community connections that could provide lasting satisfaction and meaningful contribution beyond individual career success. Her analysis emphasized education and advocacy opportunities within civilian contexts that could address social justice concerns while serving immigrant communities that needed bilingual professionals who understood cultural challenges and systemic barriers affecting family advancement and community development. Her alternative proposal focused on civilian legal careers that could provide similar intellectual challenges and professional advancement opportunities, while enabling specialization in immigration law, civil rights advocate, community legal services that would directly benefit families and individuals facing circumstances similar to those that had affected our family throughout our American experience. According to Ms. Vasquez's analysis, civilian legal practice offered superior opportunities for meaningful service, while avoiding institutional constraints and geographic limitations that military service imposed on career development and community engagement. Mrs. Vasquez also emphasized practical advantages of civilian legal careers that included greater flexibility for family obligations, geographic stability that would enable ongoing community involvement, and professional autonomy that would allow specialization in legal areas that aligned with personal values and community needs, rather than institutional priorities that might conflict with individual preferences or cultural commitment. Her perspective suggested that civilian legal practice could provide comparable professional achievement, while maintaining stronger connections to family and community relationships that provided meaning and belonging throughout adult life. The most compelling aspect of Mrs. Vasquez's intervention involved her detailed knowledge of successful Latino attorneys who had achieved significant professional recognition, while maintaining strong cultural identity and community involvement that had enhanced rather than compromised their career advancement and personal satisfaction. Her examples demonstrated that civilian legal careers could provide pathways to judicial appointments, political leadership, and community advocacy that exceeded the scope of influence that military legal practice typically enabled, while offering greater opportunities for cultural preservation and intergenerational community development. The cumulative effect of these coordinated interventions created unprecedented pressure that challenged my confidence and commitment to military service, while forcing detailed examination of motivations and objectives that had previously seemed clear and appropriate for my capabilities and professional aspirations. The sophistication of alternative proposals and the credibility of family members and community leaders who supported them required serious consideration that acknowledged legitimate concerns about military service, while maintaining commitment to authentic calling that had emerged through careful evaluation of personal values and professional interests. The emotional toll of sustained opposition from multiple respected authority figures created doubt and anxiety that affected my preparation for college departure, while undermining confidence in decision-making processes that had led to military scholarship acceptance and JAG program commitment. The possibility that experienced adults who cared about my welfare might possess superior wisdom about career development and life planning created genuine uncertainty about whether my determination represented mature judgment or stubborn resistance to beneficial guidance from people whose experience exceeded my own. Carmen's final intervention involved organizing a comprehensive family meeting that included all previously contacted relatives and community leaders for coordinated presentation of concerns and alternative proposals that would demonstrate collective family opposition to military service, offering unified support for conventional career paths that would enable immediate practical contribution to family welfare and community development. The meeting was designed to provide overwhelming evidence that military service was inappropriate for my circumstances, while creating social pressure that would make continued resistance to family guidance emotionally and practically impossible. The family meeting occurred during the final weekend before my scheduled departure for college orientation, creating maximum psychological pressure while minimizing time available for independent reflection or consultation with supportive mentors who might provide alternative perspectives on career decisions and family obligation conflicts. The timing represented Carmen's final attempt to prevent my departure through emotional manipulation and social pressure that would force immediate reconsideration of military service plans, while family members remained available to provide alternative employment and educational opportunities. The meeting included formal presentations from Uncle Miguel about construction industry opportunities, Father Rodriguez about spiritual and moral concerns regarding military service, Ms. Vasquez about civilian legal career alternatives, and additional family members who shared personal experiences and cultural perspectives that emphasized family loyalty and community responsibility as primary considerations for career development and adult life planning. The coordinated nature of their presentations created compelling arguments that addressed practical, spiritual, and cultural dimensions of career decisions while demonstrating extensive family investment in my future welfare and success. The most powerful moment of the family meeting occurred. Carmen delivered an emotional appeal that combined maternal concern with cultural values and family history to create comprehensive argument against military service, while emphasizing sacrificial investments that previous generations had made to create opportunities for conventional success should not be abandoned in pursuit of individual recognition or professional advancement that could compromise family relationships and cultural identity preservation. The meeting concluded with ultimatum that required immediate decision about military service while family members were available to implement alternative career plans that would enable me to remain within supportive community relationships while achieving professional advancement through pathways that honored rather than challenged family values and cultural traditions. The pressure created by this coordinated intervention represented the most significant challenge to my determination that I had encountered throughout the military preparation process, while testing my commitment to authentic calling against comprehensive opposition from respected authority figures, whose guidance had previously provided and direction during challenging periods of development and decision. Though overwhelming pressure from the coordinated family intervention had reached levels that threatened to undermine my confidence and commitment to military service, when an unexpected source of guidance emerged through a phone call from Colonel Sarah Martinez, the senior JAG officer who had conducted my final interview for the scholarship program. Her contact represented more than routine pre-departure communication with incoming program participants. Colonel Martinez had recognized the psychological challenges facing young people from traditional family backgrounds who chose military careers that required temporary separation from cultural communities and established support systems, while developing professional capabilities that exceeded conventional expectations. Colonel Martinez possessed extensive experience with first-generation military officers whose family circumstances created conflicts between individual advancement and collective family welfare that required sophisticated understanding of cultural dynamics and effective strategies for maintaining family relationships while pursuing demanding military careers. Approach to mentorship reflected recognition that successful officer development required addressing psychological and emotional challenges that extended beyond academic preparation and military training to encompass identity formation and relationship management skills that would determine long-term career satisfaction and personal well-being. The conversation began with Colonel Martinez acknowledging the family pressure I was experiencing while providing context about similar challenges that had affected numerous successful JAG officers throughout their career development processes. Her validation of my circumstances eliminated isolation that had developed through weeks of questioning my judgment against overwhelming opposition from respected family members and community authorities, whose guidance had previously provided stability and direction during challenging decision-making periods. Colonel Martinez explained that family resistance to military service often reflected legitimate concerns about physical danger, institutional demands, geographic separation that required honest acknowledgement rather than dismissive rejection, that could damage relationships and compromise emotional support systems that would remain important throughout military service and subsequent civilian career transition. Her framework emphasized the importance of understanding family perspectives while maintaining commitment to authentic calling that had emerged through careful evaluation of personal values and professional capabilities. The most significant aspect of Colonel Martinez's guidance involved her analysis of family dynamics that created psychological pressure designed to maintain existing relationship patterns, rather than supporting individual growth that might alter established roles and expectations within family systems. According to her assessment, opposition to military service often reflected fears about losing control over family members whose achievement might validate limiting beliefs about collective potential, while creating pressure for other family members to examine their own life choices and achievement levels. Colonel Martin provided specific examples of successful JAG officers who had navigated similar family resistance while maintaining strong relationships with parents and siblings who had initially opposed military service, but eventually recognized the professional achievement and family contribution that legal careers had enabled. Her examples demonstrated that family relationships could strengthen through individual achievement when family members understood that military service enhanced rather than compromised capacity for meaningful family support and cultural preservation. Her analysis emphasized that successful navigation of family resistance required clear communication about motivations and objectives, while demonstrating respect for family concerns and cultural values that deserved acknowledgement even when they conflicted with individual career decisions. Approach involved ongoing dialogue rather than confrontational rejection of family guidance, while maintaining boundaries that protected personal decision-making authority from emotional manipulation or pressure tactics that could compromise authentic self-expression and professional development. Colonel Martinez also addressed spiritual and moral concerns that Father Rodriguez had raised about military service compatibility with Catholic faith and ethical development that could be affected by institutional demands and legal practice requirements. Her perspective drew upon extensive experience with Catholic military personnel who had successfully integrated religious faith with professional military service, while maintaining ethical integrity and spiritual development throughout demanding career assignments that required balancing competing obligations and complex moral considerations. According to Colonel Martinez's analysis, military legal practice provided opportunities for ethical leadership and justice advocacy that aligned with Catholic social teaching about human dignity, institutional reforms, and service to others who faced challenging circumstances, requiring professional expertise and moral courage to address effective. JAG officers served as ethical advocates within military institutions while protecting individual rights and ensuring procedural fairness in situations where service members required zealous representation and institutional accountability to maintain justice and organizational integrity. Her framework positioned military legal practice as ministry opportunity that served fellow service members during their most vulnerable moments, while contributing to institutional improvements that could benefit thousands of military personnel and their families through policy development, training programs, and legal reforms that enhanced military justice and personnel management systems. The service orientation of JAG officer responsibilities aligned with religious calling toward justice advocacy and ethical leadership rather than conflicting with spiritual development or moral principles. Colonel Martinez addressed practical concerns about family financial support and geographic separation that had been emphasized during the coordinated family intervention, while providing realistic assessment of military compensation and benefits that could enable substantial family assistance throughout military service and subsequent civilian career transition. Military officer compensation exceeded most civilian starting salaries while providing comprehensive benefits, including health care, housing allowances, and educational assistance that eliminated financial burdens typically associated with professional career development. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.